Today we're going to be installing a tonneau cover motor reinforcement kit on a 1995 Saab 900S convertible. The tonneau cover motor and gearbox assembly is located in the trunk on the right side of the car, just right under there. So you'll just pull back the interior carpeting so you can gain access to it. Use a T27 Torx to loosen up one or both of the set screws at this little union here. And next I just disconnected this wiring harness here. It's got two little clips. Then removed 3 of the 10mm bolts that hold the gearbox here to the car here. So it's just 1, 2, 3. And then after that, I just took off the 2 cables in the back with a 10mm here. Slid the gearbox towards the fender and then down, so this rod gets pulled out from up in here. And next I'm just going to pull out these cables and then the whole unit should come right out. It did drop down, and then there's just a cable here that has to be removed. It looks like another 10mm there and a little clip on there. Note about these cables is before I removed them, I wanted to make sure I could put them back the same way. So I put a little black mark on this one, which is the forwardmost cable, and then this represents the unmarked cable, which goes in the backmost position, so like that. Cable here came right off with the 10mm wrench and a little clip like this, which you just pry off. But one thing I want to let you know about, this cable is connected to a lever inside the cab. That has to be in the regular position, and I'll show you that now. So right inside the car with the back seat down, you'll find a lever here. When you pull this lever down to this position, it's manual override, so you can raise and lower the tonneau cover without the engine or the electric motor being engaged. In order to remove that cable from the gearbox, it has to be pushed all the way up into this position, and that's your normal operating position. Got the tonneau cover motor and gearbox on my workbench, and you can see that this motor pivots down into the gearbox, and it does appear to be twisted. You can look in there and see that there's a big portion of the gear that's not all the way into the box, and I don't know if you can see this on the video, but if you look from this angle, there's a larger gap on this side than there is on this side over here. And I think that means that this whole piece here has been twisted out of place. So the tonneau cover motor reinforcement kit seems to replace this pin. This comes off. We'll straighten this out in the vise and put the new pin in, and then we'll see if that returns this gear farther into the gearbox. Release the motor connector from the mounting plate by squeezing both sides together. Pivot back the motor if it's not in that position already by pulling down on that lever. And then we're going to take a little drift pin punch, and we're going to knock out this pin that this hinge is pivoting on. Mount the unit in a vise so I could get a good solid place to tap on it, but the pin did come right out like that. Now we have the 2 separate pieces. unit in a vise, and from this angle you can see how the gearbox is twisted. Basically this should be parallel with this plate. So before you bend that back, you're going to want to replace the pin, and that'll protect the integrity and alignment of these two pieces. I'm going to try to use just a couple of small box end wrenches here and here to twist it back straight. The small box wrench idea didn't work for me. I couldn't get the leverage I needed. I repositioned the plate in the vise, and I used a very large set of channel locks, grabbed on there like that, and just torqued it. Now look and see, it's nice and straight. This is the reinforcement kit. The shaft here is actually a little bit larger in diameter, and it goes in here and then across here. So it replaces the factory pin, and you have to drill it out. But I could imagine at this point, if you didn't have the reinforcement kit, you could probably just put this thing back together with the original pin, and it would probably work for a while. Eventually it'll bend again like it did before. But again, if you didn't have the kit and you just wanted to get it fixed, you could probably put it back together like this. Maybe you could wedge something back in here to give it a little more strength. Put a 15/64 drill bit in my press and kind of rotated the base over, held this on and just drilled right down through the aluminum. It was easy, it just drilled through like butter. Same thing with this half. And again, you just want to be careful not to get any metal shavings on your gear or into the inside of the gearbox on the other unit. After drilling out the gearbox and motor mount, I slid the new replacement pin through and then put these brackets into place. Now you can see the design of this thing, that it really has to work, because they're fastening from the weak part where the aluminum twists directly onto the massive steel bracket on both sides. It's whoever came up with this kit, it's a really good idea. Then you just take a little punch, find the center, punch down through, and then you can just take these back off. It's just on there temporarily, and drill the plate out on the drill press. That drill hole, if you make it a little bit big, that's better in this particular application, because you don't have to get the hole to line up perfectly. And because you're just tightening flat metal to flat metal, even if the hole's a little on the big side, it's gotta go perfectly into place because of the rest of the unit lining it up for you, and it's plenty strong enough. So I've been having a hard time getting the spring in between where it has to go. And that's because I skipped a step earlier on. I was supposed to take this linkage off here, and I didn't. I just came up with an idea to use a cable tie to hold the spring closed and then slip it in with the needle nose pliers. If this doesn't work, then I'm going to have to go back and take the linkage off. And the reason why I didn't do that is because I didn't want to strip this small Allen head that they've got here. So I'm going to try to, I did try to take it off once, and it was very tight. So if this doesn't work, I'm going to have to go ahead and remove that linkage. That'll allow me to separate the metal plate from the gearbox. Then this flap will open all the way 180 degrees, and I could easily put the spring in. But let's try this and see what happens. My plan, cable tying the spring closed and sliding it in, worked. I was able to get the pin in, but it was kind of a don't try this at home project. I wouldn't recommend it. Just earlier in the process, just take this linkage off down here, and that'll save you a lot of trouble finagling there later on. You can see after I bent this out, I've got these holes drilled. These are going to go in here and stiffen the whole thing up. I just wanted to show you what it looks like now when the motor snaps into place. Wow. It's like flush up against. Before there was like a 3/8, an easy a half an inch gap in there. So no wonder why the gears weren't meeting. Okay, so I got the small little C-clips on either side. That is really tough to do unless you have the right tool for the job. And I tightened up these bolts. And it says make sure that the spring is not bound up, so when you release it, it flicks out. And that is the case. So we're ready to put this baby back in the car and test it out. Just reversing the process to get this tonneau cover motor and gearbox back into place. I connected this lower cable first, and then I made sure that this shaft was slid into the union and put it up into place, and I was able to get this one back mount bolt in, but then there's two more up top. This one wouldn't line up, so I thought about that lever that goes to this cable. I went inside the car, I pulled that down loose again, and sure enough that released enough tension so that I was able to line this bolt right up. Okay, so I've got everything connected on these two cables back here. This cable, the main bolt's tight. Now here I wanted to show, this was a little metal tab and this clip was in it. That they said you could either bend it up 10 degrees or you could just fasten it together with a cable tie. So I'm just going to fasten this here with a cable tie. I'm going to tighten this and then we can test it out. So now we can test it out and see if the motor chatters or not. All right, it works like a charm.